Welcome to another session on operating system and Linux. This is session number 13 and I'm Manibhushan D'Souza. Today we are going to look at CPU scheduling. In this session we are going to look at a few of the scheduling techniques, and that is preemptive and non-preemptive. We will also look at what is the meaning of a dispatcher, and we will see some of the scheduling criteria. So let's begin with the scheduling as such. We are familiar that in a uniprocessor system, there will be only one process in the memory, and the process, if it is making a input output request, it the CPU cannot switch to the other process because there is only one process. Now, if you have any other process to be executed, parallelly it can be done, because a CPU in a uniprocessor system can execute only one process at a time. Okay. However, we know that if we just run one process, we will not be able to make the best use of the CPU. So generally what we do is we keep more than one process in the memory. So this technique is called as multi-programming. So the objective of the multi-programming is to maximize the utilization of CPU. So we want to give full load to the CPU. In other words, we don't want the CPU to be idle. In case of a uniprocessing system, if there is nothing, if there is only one process which is running, the CPU, and if that particular process makes a input output request, the CPU cannot do anything, simply it has to wait. Whereas in the multi-programming environment, since we have more than one program, when one of the process makes an input output request, we can safely switch over to other process and then perform the or then execute the other process. Now let's look at how a general process execution takes place. Now we know we have all written C programs, or some of you have also written C++ program, and generally what you do in your program, you initialize the variables and then you take the input, and then some calculation happens, and finally the output comes on the screen. This is generally the idea. So you have the input process and the output. Now if you take any process in general, if you take any process for that matter, so they follow a cycle. Okay, and the cycle is either they are performing CPU related activity, that is their instructions are executed by CPU, or the CPU will wait for an input output request. Okay, so a process switches from the execution in the CPU or waiting for an input output to be performed. So for example, you start your program, you initialize the variable, some variables are initialized, that is CPU execution. Then you write a scanf statement. In that case, your process will have to wait for the input. Okay, so in general, how the program really works is you start the program, you load your the variables and other things. So this is the CPU work, so initialization. Then you may start reading from the keyboard, or you may start reading from the file depending upon the program that you have written. So in that case your process will not be executing, because it is input output operation. So there will be a input output activity. Then after the input output you may do some calculation. Then again this calculation requires CPU, so there will be a CPU activity. Then you may write it back to the file, or maybe you may print or display it on the monitor. And this is an input output activity, and this kind of activity will continue. So we say that when your process is doing some work on the CPU, we say that there is a burst of activity on the CPU. In the same way, when you are performing input output related activity, we say there is a burst of input output activity. So how does your program begins? It begins with the CPU burst. That is, you give lot of work to the CPU, and then some input output is required. So there will be a burst of activity for input output peripherals or input output devices. So your process will begin like this. You begin with the CPU burst, then you begin with then when there is an input required, there will be an IO or input output burst. After that, again CPU burst, and maybe again input output, and this process will continue. Finally, you will have some CPU burst, that is the last program and last part. After this, your program will go for the termination by calling the terminator on the operating system, or maybe it's going to terminate altogether. So your cycle will go like this. So you start with the CPU burst, and then IO burst, then CPU burst, then IO burst, and maybe at the end this cycle will keep on continuing, and finally at one particular point there will be a last CPU burst. After that, your program will terminate. So this is the general idea. Now, why did I tell you that thing is, so when you have a CPU burst, there is no problem because CPU is in action. CPU is given some work. But when there is an input output burst, CPU is not doing anything. It is idle. And what we want to give full load to the CPU. We don't want the CPU to be idle. So when you have the CPU burst, the initial state, when there is a CPU burst, no problem, CPU is in action. But when there is an input output burst, CPU is idle. So if the CPU is idle, what to do in this case? So that is the question that we have to answer now. So whenever CPU becomes idle, so you know that alternative way in which a process works. So you have CPU burst, then you have the IO burst. So when there is an IO burst, your CPU is idle. So when your CPU is idle, what to do? In that case, the operating system will have to select one other process. So assuming that it is a multi-programming environment, so there are more than one program or one process that can be executed. So when one of the process is performing the IO or input output burst, the operating system has to select some other process from the ready queue and execute it. Okay. Now this selection, who is going to select the process from the ready queue? We know very well. We have studied about it in the previous classes, and that is the short-term scheduler. So what is the work of a short-term scheduler? Short-term scheduler will select one process from the ready queue and give it to the CPU. Okay. So scheduler selects one of the processes among the many processes which are there. Okay. So how do I select the different processes? So just to give you an analogy, suppose you have, let's assume that you have the ready queue here, wherein there are many processes are waiting. So many processes, some of them may take longer time, some of them may be shorter time, some of them, and so on and so forth. Which one will you select among? Let's assume that all of them are the processes. So this is a process P1. So let's say this is P1 and P2, P3, and so on and so forth. So which process you are going to select? This requires a scheduling algorithm. Okay, so there will be various way in which you can select the next processes. So these are assuming that all these are the process which are there in the ready queue. So the criteria that is used for selecting the next process is decided by the scheduling algorithm, and that is what we are going to select. We are going to see. In general, the scheduling algorithms are broadly classified into two divisions. One is called as preemptive scheduling, the other one is called as non-preemptive scheduling. So first let's look at what is preemptive scheduling, and then we will look at the non-preemptive scheduling. So what is the meaning of saying preemptive? So preemptive means preempting. So you are going to empty it. So empty it from where? Empty it from the CPU. That's it. Okay. So in this particular scheduling, okay, operating system will forcefully stop a running process and put it back to the ready queue. So let's look at the diagram that we are familiar with. So there will be a ready queue containing many processes. Okay, so we have many processes here. There will be this one resource, and that's very much required for us. And what is that resource? That is our CPU. One among them is selected, and the CPU starts executing one of the process. Now in this process is executing, in preemptive scheduling what's going to happen? So the operating system, even though it is executing, the operating system forcefully stops this executing process and puts it back to the ready queue. So this kind of scheduling is called as preemptive. So in the preemptive schedule, what is happening? The executing process is forcefully stopped. Okay, so when you say the executing process is forcefully stopped, it has to release the CPU. Not, it's not the end of it. It has to release all the resources that it was using, and it is put back into the ready queue. Okay, so generally how does this kind of algorithm works? Generally it is not always true, because there are other situations. Generally this kind of scheduling algorithm works by giving every process a fixed time. So generally it is called as quantum. Every process is given a quantum. Quantum is one small unit of time. It could be 1 millisecond, 1 microsecond, 10 millisecond. It depends. So quanta depends. So generally it is a very small unit of time. So let's say 1 millisecond. So every process is given 1 millisecond. Now you know very well, you cannot your program cannot complete it within 1 millisecond. It may require 1 hour altogether. In that case, only for you may have a very lengthy code. So assume that you have written a C program, and because you have most of you are familiar with the C program, so you have written many lines of C program. Okay, so this is the C program. So this whole thing, let's assume, I'm just giving you a simple example. Let's assume that this whole thing is going to take 10 milliseconds to complete. So this whole thing is going to take 10 milliseconds for completing. But what is our quantum? So our quantum is 1 millisecond. In that case, what will happen? So for 1 millisecond, whatever that can be completed within 1 millisecond, that will be executed. So small unit of your code will be executed for 1 millisecond. Then what will happen? Then even though you are executing 1 millisecond, you require 10 milliseconds to complete, but 1 millisecond is given to you, so you complete only that 1 millisecond part. You don't run, you don't say that okay, we will do it very quickly. You cannot do it very quickly because CPU is going at that speed only. So if you have 1 gigahertz CPU, it will not suddenly change to 10 gigahertz. It's not possible. 1 gigahertz means it will go at 1 gigahertz only. So you are not overclocking the CPU. It is not that case. So what you are doing is your program, you take 1 millisecond, whatever that can be completed in 1 millisecond, that is executed. After that, what happens? After that, the operating system says okay, I gave you 1 quantum. So you require how many quanta? You require 10 quanta to complete. 1 quanta is 1 millisecond. You require 10 milliseconds. So 1 quanta is 1 millisecond. So you require 10 quanta to complete. So I gave you 1 quanta. 9 quanta is pending. I know that. Now you go back to the ready queue. You be there. I'll call you later. So at a time you are doing only one quanta. Then your program is or your process is forcefully stopped. Something else will execute in that time, and after that it will come back to you. Okay, so generally these kind of algorithms, they let the process to execute for a maximum fixed time. After that, if it has not, within that, if you complete it, well and good. If your program is able to complete within one quanta, well and good. So if one quanta is 1 millisecond, you are able to complete it even half a millisecond, well and good. It will schedule something else after that. Suppose if you're not able to do it, then these problems will come. So the remaining after that. Okay, so initially one quanta of work is given. After that, next quanta, not immediately, maybe. So you are put back to the ready queue, and some other thing will work, and after some time again your process is called. One quanta again, one quanta time is over, again put it back onto the queue. So this is how it's going to go. So let's assume that you have the ready queue as usual, and you have your CPU. So let's assume this is your CPU. So your code, you have it here. So very big code was there. So you are given the CPU for one quanta. After one quanta, your process is again brought back to the ready queue. Something else will be executed. After some time, again your process will execute for one quanta. Then again put back to the ready queue. So this cycle will continue. So you are given one quanta to complete it. If you can't complete it, come again for the remaining time. So next quanta. So next quanta means two quanta are given. 10 quantas were pending, were there initially. One quanta is consumed means 9 quanta is remaining. So if you are doing it for one cycle, so this is going to be 9 milliseconds remaining. Again, if it is called, it's going to be 8 milliseconds, and so on and so forth. So every time your code one piece by piece, your code are getting executed. So in the first quanta, some part is executed. In the second quanta, second part. Third quanta, third part, and finally everything will be executed. So this is the idea of preemptive scheduling. So why do we use the preemptive scheduling? So one is, this is a case. So what is the case? That means to say that we are giving a equal chance for everyone. So everybody is given a chance. Otherwise, some of them are given the chance, you are not. So you know very well, when you were kids, some of them are playing very good batsmen are there, very good bowlers are there. So they will get a batting, they will get a bowling, but you are there in the field doing nothing. That is not a good idea. So here everybody is given. So we know how we play cricket. So we give 1 over for one each person or something like that. So somehow we do that in real life. But in CPU, what it is doing is for every process it says, okay, I will give you quanta of time. You execute. Then somebody else will be given. Let them execute. After that, somebody else will be execute. After that, you come back again, and we will run that cycle. Okay. So there is another reason why the preemptive schedulings are being used. One other reason is there are environment wherein you have some processes which have higher priority than the others. So you know, you are driving on a road on your bike or scooter or anything, ambulance comes. So ambulance has a higher priority. You will have to give a way to that ambulance. Okay, so ambulance has a high priority, you don't have that priority. So even though you are driving, road is yours, you have also paid the road tax, but ambulance has a higher priority. So ambulance will go first, and then you follow it. So this is the idea. In the same way, all the processors are there, they require CPU, but some of the processors have a higher priority, like the process which are running on the kernel or something, some processor. In that case, what will happen if such a process comes? They will interrupt the CPU and they will say that there is an urgent call, I want to execute now. so interrupted. So in that case, again your process is brought back to the ready queue, and those process will work. So this is very very important, because in real time system and others, so wherein if you don't handle the interrupt, there will be a problem. So just to give you an example, all of how all of our using elevators. So what is elevator? Is a lift. So in lift there is one CPU that monitors which floor you are going. So you enter into the lift, you press floor number 5, and you press the floor number 5, and the lift starts. And you know very well, in some of the lifts there will be music that is played. So second process will start, that music will keep on playing and so on. When the fifth floor is reached, what will happen? That switch will say to the CPU that you the fifth floor has come, you stop now. So if the CPU says no, I'm playing music, I'll do it later, what will happen? You will reach the 8th floor. So when a higher priority work comes, you will have to stop the currently executing low priority work and then reschedule the higher priority work. So this is how it goes. Okay, some of the algorithm, we will see this algorithm, don't worry about it. So some of the algorithms which are used for preemptive scheduling are round robin scheduling, priority based or event driven scheduling, and shortest remaining time next. These are all preemptive scheduling algorithm. We will see it in the next session, what how these algorithms work. Okay, one thing you must understand about preemptive scheduling is preemptive scheduling incurred cost. What is the one cost? One cost is you are switching from one process to the other process. Switching requires context to be copied, to be saved, and to be loaded. It is a cost that incurs. Okay, you are wasting some time is wasted in saving the context of the current process and loading the context of the other process. Okay, apart from this, the preemptive scheduling may also create some unexpected problems. So let's assume that there are two processes which are sharing some data. So one of the process was updating a file, and half the data has been updated. Then because of the preemptive scheduling, this process is stopped and the second process is given the chance. So if the second process starts reading, what will happen? Half the work is done by the first process, and the second process will read the value. In that case, what will happen? The result is unexpected. So let me give you a simplest example. So your marks cards are there. Okay, I am entering the marks in all the subject. Say first subject you got 75, in the second subject you got 68. Let's say which subject you don't bother about it. Next subject you got 81. My process is stopped. So before I could type the next one, my process is stopped and the result calculation process starts. So result will come. You have assumed that you have 6 subject. This is not entered by me. This is not entered by me. This is not entered by me. So what the result calculation will do? It will add all of them, and you know very well default value of integers are 0. Not in C, but in most other programming languages. So what will happen is it will assume that for remaining 3 subjects you scored 0. What is your percentage? So your percentage excuse me, will simply shift down. So this is unexpected. So this kind of a problem can occur if you use the preemptive scheduling. So what is the solution for that? Solution for this is non-preemptive scheduling. So what is non-preemptive scheduling? So once a process is given the CPU, the operating system will not forcefully remove it. The CPU is given until the process releases the CPU, either voluntary. What is the meaning saying voluntary is the process terminates it, or process waits for an input output request. In that case, automatically it will be pulled out from the CPU. So in this case, once a CPU is given, operating system has no control in stopping that process. The process itself must return the CPU back to the operating system. So this is called as non-preemptive scheduling. Okay. What is the advantage of this is, once a process is given for CPU, it will go for completions. Okay. All the other processes which are there in the ready queue must have to wait until this process completes. What is the bad part about it? So let's assume that you have, again let's assume that you have a ready queue here, and there is one process which is taking lot of time. There is other process which is taking very small time, with the other process which takes still smaller time. Now suppose this process is given to the CPU. Suppose if this process is given to the CPU, in that case what will happen? So if this process is given to CPU, all the others, so let's assume that this is going to take 5 minutes. This is 1 second. This is less than 1 second. Or if you want to get a good estimation, let's assume that this is going to take 30 minutes. So 30 minutes for this. This is going to take 1 minute, and this is 1 second. So this is just 1 second. For 1 second, you will have to wait for 30 minutes. It's not a great idea. However, this is a fair scheduling. What is the meaning of saying fair scheduling is, if this comes first, whoever comes first is given the CPU, and we don't disturb. We say who came first, we are giving. If you have 1 second, it's okay, but that process came first, so I am giving it. So this kind of a non-preemptive scheduling is used in a certain environment wherein the hardware does not support the preemptive scheduling. So in order to support this preemptive scheduling, the hardware, that is electronic component which is part of the computer, must support that. So otherwise it's not possible for preemptive scheduling to work. If your hardware is not supporting, then you will have to go for non-preemptive scheduling. Today it is not an issue, because today we have very sophisticated machines coming out on the market, but olden days that was not the case. In particular, the Windows Microsoft Windows 3.1 edition, and even the old version of Mac was using non-preemptive scheduling. You must understand one thing here is Microsoft Windows 3.1 is not your Windows that you are looking at today. It's a very very old system. In fact, in olden days there was DOS, and this Windows was just a windowing manager that was running on top of the disk operating system. So that was the idea. So you might not have seen this operating system. If you want, you can just search on the Google or YouTube to see how this system, how this Windows 3.1 appeared. Very old system, but it is not so fascinating today, but it was being used. Some of the algorithms that are used in the non-preemptive scheduling is first come first serve, that is FCFS, and shortest job first. These are all the algorithms which are using non-preemptive scheduling. Now when we talk about the scheduling, we have to have somebody who is going to take the process from the ready queue and give it to the CPU. So let's again look at this diagram. So we have this ready queue, and then we have this CPU. So this CPU, and there are many processes which are waiting. So somebody has to stop the currently working process and then allocate the new process to the CPU. Who is doing that? is the dispatcher. Dispatcher is a module that is part of the CPU scheduling. So it is going to control who is going to, which is the process to be selected and given to the CPU. So what are the things it's going to do? It's going to do that context switching. Remember, one process was working here, one process was executing, and you stopped this. If you stop this, the context of it has to be saved, and the other process is loaded. So that means its context has to be loaded. So this requires context switching, and that is taken care by it. It may have to even switch to the user mode from the kernel mode. So that switching also it does it. And once you load the context, the program counter has to go to a particular location from which the program should continue. So I've already told you, once you load it, it is not starting from the beginning. Wherever you stopped last time, from that point the program should continue. So if you are if your program is executing, it came up to 25% and then it was stopped. Again, if you are running, it must start from the 25%, not from the 0%. So this is taken care by the dispatcher. So dispatcher, one very important thing, is called every now and then. That's the reason dispatcher must be as quick as possible. It must be quickly stop one program and then start the other program. Now the time it takes to stop one process and start the other process is called as dispatch latency. So dispatch latency is the time that is required to stop one executing process and to start. What is the time between stopping one process and starting the other? So there will be a time delay, and this delay is called as dispatch latency. It must be as small as possible. Now we know that some of the algorithms I have just told you, round robin, first come first serve, and so on. There are many algorithms which are available for which can be used for scheduling. Now, how do I choose one of the algorithms for my particular program or for my particular operating system? It depends on the properties of those algorithms. Every algorithm has certain properties, and we need to somehow select one of the algorithm for our program. So should I go for first come first serve, shortest job first, or round robin scheduling? There are many algorithms. I have just told you some of the names of it. Which one should I select? It depends on the criteria. Okay, so there is a criteria that is involved in selecting the algorithms. And what are those criteria? Criteria is the first one is CPU scheduling, throughput, turnaround time, waiting time, and response time. Based on this, we go for the selection of the algorithm. So let's start with the first one, CPU utilization. What is the meaning of saying CPU utilization? Okay, it is the ratio of busy time of the processor to the total time utilized by the process. So if you take a process, how much time the process was actually executing. So how long it was performing the calculation or performing the execution or performing its task. This is called as a CPU utilization. In other words, how much time the CPU was actually doing its work. So suppose if you have switched on the machine and if you were working for 1 hour on your laptop or on your computer desktop, how much time within this 1 hour, how much time the CPU was actually performing the calculation. So is it all the 1 hour CPU was doing calculation, or is it just a half an hour the CPU is doing the calculation, or is it a 15 minutes CPU was doing calculation and remaining 45 minutes it was idle. So this is the CPU utilization. Now the question comes, why the CPU is doing work only for 15 minutes. The reason is, you know very well, when there is an input output operation, if the process makes an input output call, CPU remains idle, it will not do anything. When a process is switched, when there is a context switch from one process to the other, CPU remains idle because it cannot proceed unless it has the full environment of the process. So some time is spent or is wasted because of all these problems. So that is why CPU utilization is not always 100%. You can't get that thing. So what is the meaning of saying CPU utilization is 100% means you were working for 1 hour and the CPU was put into action for one complete 1 hour. It was doing some or other task. Such a thing may not happen, but if it is happening, that means CPU utilization is moved. So generally we want the CPU utilization to be higher because we want to make the best use of the CPU. In fact, we want to make the best use of all the resources, not just the CPU, but in general we want the CPU to be put into action for every millisecond that we are getting it. So what is how do we calculate the CPU utilization? So CPU or processor utilization is processor busy time divided by processor busy time plus processor idle time. So sometime processor is busy, sometime processor is idle. That together is that time. So 1 hour you were using, total 1 hour, out of which processor was busy only for 15 minutes. So that means 75% of the time has been wasted for other activities. So that can happen. Okay. In general, CPU must be kept busy as much as possible. So the range can be from 0 to 100%, but we don't really get that thing. Generally, it is 40% if it is a highly loaded system, or 90% if it is a heavily used process. So if there are less number of processes, then the CPU utilization will be less. But if there are more number of processes, CPU utilization can be increased. Okay. Next one is the throughput. So throughput is how much work have we completed in a unit time. How many works has been completed. So in other words, number of processes which are completed in a unit time. So unit time could be 1 minute, 1 second, 1 microsecond, or anything. In a given unit of time, how much work has been done. So for example, if you go to college, in one day 6 hours are there. So you know very well. So the question is, if all the 6 hours are there, the throughput will be okay. You have used the best. Only 5 hours are there, then it is the throughput is less, because only 4 hours were there. The throughput will be less because when the time consumed is 6 hours. In the 6 hours, you were doing 6 classes were there. So that means your throughput is good. In the 6 hours that you spent in college, only 3 hours classes were there. That means the throughput is less because you are not learning for 3 hours. You wasted 3 hours. So this is the idea. So throughput is number of process. What is the meaning of saying number of process? Because you know very well, our systems are multi-programming system. That means more than one process can be there working on the system. So number of process completed by the time that is consumed. So in 5 minutes, if 10 processes are completed, okay, so that is good. In 5 minutes, 10 processes are completed. Throughput is good. In 5 minutes, only 5 processes are completed, 50% reduction. In 5 minutes, only one process is completed. Throughput is less. Remember, okay. You must understand a very important thing. So I said that in 5 minutes 10 processes were completed, so you were very happy. Okay, so throughput is very high. So remember, throughput does not give you the real idea, because so the question will come, it depends on the type of process that you are using. Suppose you have a process that are requesting for input output operation every now and then. So unless the input comes, it cannot proceed. So you cannot say that no, throughput is less here. The throughput is less because it was making input output request, and the input output in came within 5 minutes. So what it can do? It can't proceed, it can't complete because there is no input, or there it cannot output. Okay, so it depends on the nature of the process. So don't think that okay, a throughput is less means it is bad. No, it is not. It depends on the type of process that you are using. Okay, so long process, it may complete one process in 1 hour. If it is a very small process, 10 process may be completed. So again, it depends on the length. Okay, so if more number of processes are completed, then generally we say that the throughput is good because more things are completed. But it did not be true. I have already told you, it depends on the characteristics of the and the resource requirement. So if the program itself or the process itself is a very lengthy process, then only one process may be completed. If there are processes are very very small, tiny processes are there, too many processes will be completed very quickly. So you cannot simply judge by throughput. Now next one is the turnaround time. Turnaround time is the total duration of time that is taken by the process to complete a task. So how much time it has taken for completing the work. Now I will give you a simplest example. You go and watch a movie on theater. Nowadays you can't do it, but assuming that you went and you want to watch a movie. So what is the total, not on television, not on your laptop, not on your mobile, on theater. Let's assume that you will go to the theater or multiplex to watch the movie. So movie is there for 1.5 hours movie. So movie 1.5 hours or 2 hours movies will be there. Just assume that it is a 1.5 hour movie. So what is the total time required to watch the movie? It is not 1.5 hour. It is not 1 hour 30 minutes. 1 hour 30 minutes is the length of the movie. But from your house, you will have to go to theater. So some time is spent there. To take a ticket, you will have to stand in queue and then get the ticket. Some time is wasted. After the movie, in between the movie, there is an interval. Some time is wasted. After the movie, again, you will have to come back to your house. Again, time is wasted. So look at the time. Even though the movie is for 1 hour 30 minutes, you may spend additional 1 hour for going to the theater, interval time, and then coming back to house and so on. So totally 2 hours 30 minutes are spent. Why 2 hours 30 minutes are spent? First 1.5 hours were there for the movie, that is the length of the movie. But 1 hour extra was there because you went from home to the theater and you came back to from the theater back to home. Okay, so it is totally 2.5 hours. Similarly, some time is required for the process to execute. So let's assume 1 hour 30 minutes is required for a process to complete its work. So is it only 1 hour 30 minutes the process is spending on the system? The answer is no, because sometime it may have to stay in a ready queue because it is making input output request or some other higher priority process is working. So there is excuse me, so there is always a chance that your processor will take more time as compared to the other required time. So there will be extra time that is required for a process to complete. Okay, so what is turnaround time then? Turnaround time is the total duration of the time taken by the process to complete its task. Okay, it is the total time. So from your house, you look at the time. Okay, you start at 1 o'clock from your house, and what time you came back to your house? You came back to your house at 4:30 or maybe 5:30 or 5 o'clock, whatever it is. That is a turnaround time, total time. Okay, sum of the period that you have spent altogether. So it is, in case of our processor, it is a sum of the period that was spent waiting in the memory, waiting in the ready queue, definitely executing the instruction in the CPU, doing input output operation, and so on and so forth. So it's a total time. So turnaround time is the time when the process got completed minus the time when the process was submitted. So a difference between the time when the process is completed and the time when the process is submitted is called as the turnaround time. Next one is the waiting time. So I told you that when you go to a movie, 1.5 hours is the length of the movie. What was the other time that you spent? You were waiting for the movie. Okay, from house you went waiting for the movie 1.5 hours. After that again, you when you came back you were waiting. So some extra time is spent. So in the same way, when you gave the process to the CPU, it may take 30 minutes for it to complete, but the remaining time it was waiting in the queue, waiting for input output operation. So how much time does it spend in waiting? What is the time that it has spent in waiting? That is called as a waiting time, as simple as that. Okay, so it specifies the time that the process spends in the ready queue. Okay, it is definitely less than the turnaround time, because the waiting time plus the execution time makes it a turnaround. So what is waiting time? Waiting time is turnaround time minus processing time. So actually 1.5 hour length movie was there, but you took 3 hours. So in that case, 1.5 hour extra you have spent. Where did you spend? Waiting. Okay, so that is the idea that you have. So waiting time is the turnaround total time minus the actual processing time. The next one is the response time. So response is how quickly I get the response. Okay, so suppose I am doing it online class now. Suppose if it was a regular class, and in the regular class, if I ask you a question, okay, what is your name? If I ask, pinpoint to somebody and say, okay, what is your name? So what is the meaning of saying response time? Response time is how quickly I get that first response. Okay, my name is, so that my it starts, that's the response you started. So some people are very quickly responding. So if I ask what is your name, some people will stand up and say my name is, and so on. And others will take longer time. Okay, to start only they will look here, there, and then they will start. Okay. So response time is less, very well. Okay, or more in their case, it takes more time for them to respond. So in an interactive system, response time must be less. So you type a command, nothing happens for 1 minute. What you will do, you will touch the button, you will press the mouse, you will again switch off the machine, because it's not responding. So you say, sir, it is not responding. So you want the, in an interactive system, you want immediately response. It is not, I don't want the full output to come, but something to come right at the beginning. When I press a button, I want something to be shown, not all the result. All the result, it will take longer time. So what the process will do is it will start producing the output, but it will, the whole thing may take longer time. But if I get something, so very well, you go to internet, you search for something, you go to the website. Now if nothing comes, you will switch off you close the browser. Something is coming, not a full page is not loaded, slowly everything is getting loaded. So that's good. If the response is very quick, you don't mind it is coming slowly. Okay, so what is this response time as such? So response time, okay, response time is the time when of submission of a request until the first response is produced. So remember, it is not the whole response that has come, it is not the whole output. Okay, it has come, but it is some response has come, that's the only thing. So when you type the command, okay, something, print enter, if first response, what's the time for the first response to come? After that, many things may come. First response to come is the one. Remember, it is limited by the speed of the output device also. Okay, if the output devices are slow, like if you type something on your monitor, the response is very quick. But if you do the same thing on the printer may take some time for it to print, so response may slightly delay. Okay. So in terms of equation, how do you write the response time? Response time is the time of the first response minus time of submission of the request. So what is the time at which I got the response minus time of submission is the response time. Okay. Now, when we, I told you that all these are criteria. So when we look at scheduling algorithms, the scheduling algorithm must balance between these criteria. Remember that not all of them need not be the best values. It is not possible. You won't get everything, the best values in any of the algorithm. There will be some will be good in some part, some will be bad at some part, others will be good at some other part. So you will have to choose something that fits in the given situation. So, for example, if the response time is fast, okay, but the CPU utilization will be reduced. Why? Because it's able to respond very quick, or the throughput will reduce. So immediately only one process is being done. What about the others? Others are not given because see, you are only one process is being used by the CPU. Others are not given any chance because CPU says that I want to quickly respond. So what will happen? The throughput will reduce. Only one process will be completed. Suppose if you increase the throughput, response will be slower. So you have to make a kind of sacrifice from between one among them. Okay, that's all in this class. In the next class, we will see the different algorithms, and we will see what are which one algorithm is good and how they are being used. So if you want to learn more about this topic, please refer to the Galvin's operating system book. Thank you for your interest.